The tall glass towers of the Galactic Council shook like leaves in a storm. Ambassador Veltar stood at the main control panel, his 6 arms working fast to send out the most important message in galactic history. Outside the windows, space looked normal, but Veltar knew better. The machine monsters were coming. "How many star systems now?" Veltar asked his assistant, though he already knew the answer would make his stomach turn. 17, sir. All gone. Every planet stripped bare. Every ship turned into scrap metal. The young officer's voice cracked. The machines learn from every battle. They get smarter, stronger, faster. Veltar closed his eyes for a moment. 17 systems meant billions of lives lost. Entire civilizations that had taken thousands of years to build, wiped out in weeks. The mechanical swarms didn't just kill. They consumed everything. Metal, organic matter, even the atmosphere of planets. They left behind nothing but empty space and floating debris. "Send the emergency signal to everyone," Veltar ordered. "I don't care if they're enemies, friends, or something in between. Send it to the Krathan Empire. Those warriors love a good fight. Contact the Vorthok Fleet Command. Their strategic minds might find a solution. Even reach out to the mercenary guilds. I'll offer them whatever they want." The communication officer, a nervous creature with tentacles for hands, began typing rapidly. "Sir, what about the smaller powers? The trade federations? The mining colonies?" "All of them," Veltar said firmly. "We need soldiers, not politicians. We need beings who know how to fight, not how to make speeches." The first day brought no responses. The second day was the same. By the third day, Veltar began to panic. The machine swarms were only 6 star systems away now, moving like a plague across the galaxy. Their scouts reported the same thing every time. More ships, better weapons, smarter tactics. On the 4th day, the Krathan Empire finally responded. Their message was short and brutal. "Our fleets are engaged elsewhere, cannot assist." Vorthok Alliance sent an even shorter reply. "Insufficient data for strategic planning. Request denied." Veltar felt his hopes crashing down. The greatest military powers in the galaxy were abandoning them. The mercenaries wanted payment up front, payment to council. Couldn't guarantee if they were all dead in a month. Then, on the 5th day, something strange happened. The communications array picked up a signal from the edge of known space. The coordinates made the entire technical staff step back from their stations. The communication officer said, his tentacles trembling, "We're getting a response from Sector 7 Alpha." Every being in the room went quiet. Sector 7 Alpha was marked in red on every star chart. Biohazard warnings covered the entire region. The few exploration ships that had ventured there never came back. The survivors who did return spoke of worlds where the very air would kill most species, where gravity crushed bones, where radiation turned flesh to liquid. The transmission was full of static and interference. When the voice finally came through clearly, it sounded different from any species they knew. Rougher, more aggressive. Like the voice belonged to something that had spent its entire life fighting just to stay alive. "This is Admiral Jake Morrison. Of the Terran Defense Fleet, we received your message loud and clear. Don't worry about payment or politics. We're already on our way." The line went dead, leaving the council chamber in shocked silence. "Admiral," the xenobiologist whispered, his voice full of fear. "That signal came from the quarantine zone.
Oh.
Civilized could survive in that region of space. The radiation alone would kill us in minutes. The gravity wells would crush our ships. What kind of beings live in such a place?" Veltar stared at the star charts, his mind racing. The red zone covered dozens of systems, all marked as uninhabitable death traps. Yet somehow, something not only lived there, but had built a defense fleet. What manner of creatures had evolved in such a hostile environment? What would beings look like if they came from worlds that tried to kill them every single day? For the first time in weeks, Veltar felt a spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they had found the warriors they desperately needed. The first thing that shocked the alien diplomats wasn't the size of the human fleet, but how it appeared. Most civilized ships dropped out of hyperspace gracefully, like dancers stepping onto a stage. The human vessels burst through reality like angry wolves breaking through a fence. Space itself seemed to crack and burn around them. Ambassador. Veltar watched through the observation deck's massive windows as the human ships moved closer. Each vessel told a story of violence. Burn marks covered their hulls where energy weapons had struck. Metal plates were welded over holes, creating a patchwork of repairs that would make any proper engineer weep. Some ships had weapons bolted onto their surfaces in places where weapons were never meant to go. "By the ancient stars," whispered Council Leader Thren, "what have we invited here?" The lead ship, a massive cruiser that looked like it had survived a dozen wars, slowly approached the docking bay. Its hull was black with scorch marks, and strange symbols were painted along its sides. The technical crew reported that the ship's weapon systems violated so many galactic treaties that they had stopped counting after 40. Captain Lisa Rodriguez stepped out of the docking tube, wearing what looked like a full environmental suit. The suit was thick, bulky, and covered with warning labels in a language none of the aliens recognized. When she reached the reception area, she began removing the helmet. Every alien in the room took a step backward. According to their files, beings from Sector 7 Alpha needed extreme environmental protection to survive anywhere else. The atmospheric pressure alone should crush their internal organs. The oxygen levels that other species breathed comfortably should burn their lungs. But Rodriguez pulled off her helmet and took a deep breath of the station's air like it was the most natural thing in the world. She looked around the room with bright, alert eyes that seemed to take in every detail instantly. Her skin had a healthy color, her breathing was steady, and she moved with the confidence of a predator in its natural habitat. "Greetings, she," said, her voice clear and strong. "I'm Captain Lisa Rodriguez, representing Admiral Morrison and the Terran Defense Fleet." Council Leader Thren, still keeping his distance, consulted his datapad nervously. "Captain, our files indicate that Terra is classified as uninhabitable by galactic standards. Class 12 Death World. How do you survive there?" Rodriguez laughed, and the sound made several aliens flinch. It wasn't the polite chuckle of diplomatic meetings or the careful humor of interspecies relations. It was the laugh of someone who found genuine amusement in the question, like a shark being asked how it survived in water. "Uninhabitable?" She repeated, still smiling. "That's funny. We call it home. Call it paradise, actually. Terra gave us everything we needed to become what we are." She gestured toward the tactical display showing the mechanical swarm's latest attacks. "And right now, what you need." The aliens exchanged worried glances. This human spoke about a death world like it was a vacation resort. Captain Ambassador Veltar said carefully, "We've lost 17 star systems to these mechanical beings. Our greatest military minds have studied the problem for months. Our most advanced fleets have engaged them with our finest strategies, yet we continue to lose. What makes you think your people can succeed where we have failed?" Rodriguez walked over to the tactical display, her movements smooth and confident. She studied the battle reports, the fleet formations, the casualty numbers. Her expression grew more amused with each piece of data she reviewed. "I see the problem," she said finally, turning back to face the assembled diplomats. "Your formations are absolutely perfect. Your battle lines are textbook examples of military precision. Your casualty rates are remarkably low for major engagements. Your strategies are elegant, sophisticated, and follow every rule of civilized warfare." She paused, and her smile revealed teeth that were clearly designed for tearing meat. Several aliens instinctively took another step back. "That's exactly why you're losing," she continued. "You're fighting these machines like civilized beings. You're trying to minimize casualties, preserve resources, and follow the rules of engagement. You're treating this like a chess game, where both sides play by the same rules." Rodriguez pointed at the swarm's attack patterns on the display. "But these machines don't care about rules. They don't care about casualties. They adapt, they learn, and they exploit every weakness in your civilized approach to warfare." Her expression grew serious for the first time since her arrival. "You need someone who doesn't play by the rules. You need someone who comes from a place where the rules are simple, survive or die. And on Terra, we've been playing that game for millions of years." The massive mechanical swarm had conquered 17 star systems using the same strategy every time. Their advanced computers would analyze enemy fleet movements, predict battle patterns, and calculate the most efficient way to destroy opposing forces. For months, this approach had worked perfectly against every civilized species in the galaxy. Then the humans arrived, and everything changed. Commander Mike Bradley sat in the captain's chair of his destroyer, the Defiant, watching the enemy fleets through the main view screen. The mechanical ships moved in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with advanced armor that had deflected the best weapons the galaxy could offer. Behind him, his crew worked at their stations with a calm efficiency that came from years of training. Sir, his tactical officer reported. Enemy flagship is directly ahead. It's 3 times our size and heavily armored. Should we coordinate with the fleet for a joint assault? Bradley studied the massive enemy vessel for a moment, then made a decision that would have horrified any military academy instructor in the galaxy. All power to engines. Arm the nuclear charges. We're going in. The bridge fell silent for a heartbeat. Then his weapons officer, a young woman from the orbital colonies, grinned and began entering the commands. Nuclear charges armed. And ready, sir? Should I set them for maximum yield? Set them for everything we've got, Bradley replied, his voice steady as stone. If we're doing this, we're doing it right. The Defiant began accelerating toward the enemy flagship, its engines pushing the ship faster and faster. Command ship. The Krathon military observer watched his sensors in growing horror. Bradley, what are you doing? The alien commander screamed into his communicator. You're on a direct collision course with their flagship. Pull back immediately. Bradley's voice came through the comm system calm, as if he were discussing the weather. Roger that. Command. Collision course confirmed. Tell my wife back on Luna Base that I love her and tell my kids their dad went out swinging. The alien. Observer stared at his screen in disbelief. This is madness. You'll destroy your own ship. That's the idea, Bradley replied cheerfully. See? That's your problem right there. You think losing a ship is failure? We think it's just the cost of doing business. The Defiant accelerated to 40% light speed, becoming a spear of metal and fury aimed at the heart of the enemy. Fleet. The mechanical swarm's computers tried desperately to calculate a response, but their programming had no reference for this kind of attack. Suicide runs were not part of their tactical database because no rational species would sacrifice valuable resources without strategic benefit. The impact was spectacular. The Defiant struck the enemy flagship with the force of a small star going nova. Both ships disappeared in a ball of nuclear fire that lit up half the battlefield. The explosion was so massive that 3 nearby mechanical vessels were caught in the blast wave and torn apart by the raw energy release. But the humans weren't finished. Commander Beth Williams, Bradley's wingman, had been waiting for exactly this moment. While the enemy computers were still trying to process what had happened, she led her squadron through the gap in their formation. Her ship, the Relentless, dove through the chaos like a hawk among chickens. All units, this is Williams. Broadcast to her squadron. Bradley just opened the door for us. Let's not waste his gift. Attack pattern Chaos 7, maximum aggression. Her pilots responded with wild cheers that would have terrified any civilized species. They scattered in all directions, each ship attacking different targets with no regard for formation or tactical coordination. The mechanical swarm's computers, designed to counter-organize military strategy, began experiencing system errors trying to track 12 different chaotic attack patterns simultaneously. Meanwhile, on the surface of a partially consumed planet, Colonel Tom Harris was leading his ground forces through what any other species would consider a radioactive hellscape. The mechanical swarm had begun stripping the world's atmosphere, leaving behind deadly radiation that would kill most galactic species in minutes. Harris and his troops moved through the poisoned landscape wearing nothing more than standard combat gear, their bodies adapted to handle radiation levels that would turn alien flesh into liquid soup. The mechanical defenders had positioned themselves in the most contaminated areas, assuming no organic life could survive there. They had badly underestimated humanity's definition of livable conditions. Contact ahead, shouted Sergeant Danny Foster over the comm system. Enemy defensive position, heavily fortified. Outstanding, Harris replied with genuine enthusiasm. Boys and girls, looks like we found ourselves a real fight. Remember these Metalheads have been having it easy up until now. It's time to show them what a bad day looks like. The mechanical defenders opened fire with plasma weapons hot enough to melt titanium. The human soldiers charged forward through the barrage, laughing and shouting battle cries that their ancestors had used when fighting with stone axes. "Just another day at the office," Harris bellowed as explosions erupted around him. "Nothing we haven't seen before." And that was the moment the mechanical swarm's central processing cores began to understand their terrible mistake. These weren't civilized beings fighting a war. These were apex predators who had spent millions of years learning how to survive on a planet that actively tried to kill them every single day. The battle that changed everything started like any other engagement, but it ended with the entire galaxy questioning what they thought they knew about warfare. Captain Diana Foster commanded a small battle group of 12 human ships when they encountered the largest mechanical swarm fleet anyone had ever seen, over 100 enemy vessels moving in perfect formation. Any rational military commander would have retreated immediately. The odds were impossible. Even the most optimistic battle computer would have calculated their chances of survival at less than 1%. But Foster wasn't any rational commander, and humans had never been particularly interested in impossible odds. "All ships, this is Foster," she announced over the fleet communications. "We've got 100+ mechanical ships ahead of us. They outgun us, they outnumber us, and according to every military manual in the galaxy, we should run away." Screaming, she paused, and her officers could hear the smile in her voice. "Good thing we never read those manuals. All units prepare for full engagement. Remember, we're not here to survive, we're here to win." The alien liaison aboard her flagship, a nervous creature named Zephin from the diplomatic corps, immediately began protesting. "Captain Foster, this is suicide. We must retreat and call for reinforcements." "Reinforcements?" Foster laughed. "We are the reinforcements." What followed was 3 hours of the most brutal space combat the galaxy had ever witnessed. Foster's ships didn't try to preserve themselves or minimize casualties. Instead, they threw themselves at the enemy fleet with the fury of beings who had grown up on a world where survival meant fighting every single day. The destroyer Thunderbolt, commanded by Captain Kevin Walsh, took devastating fire from 6 enemy ships simultaneously. Instead of retreating for repairs, Walsh ordered all remaining power diverted to weapons and rammed his burning ship directly into the enemy flagship's command section. The explosion took out both vessels and damaged 4 others, the cruiser Dauntless. Under Captain Jenny Martinez found herself surrounded by 20 mechanical ships. Rather than surrender or try to escape, she ordered her crew to overload the ship's reactor and used her vessel as a massive bomb, clearing a hole in the enemy formation that 3 other human ships immediately exploited. One by one, Foster's ships were destroyed, but each loss inflicted devastating damage on the mechanical fleet. The human crews fought their vessels until the very last moment, using tactics that defied every principle of self-preservation known to galactic civilization. When the battle finally ended, only Foster's flagship remained functional, its hull scarred and burning, life support systems failing. Around them floated the wreckage of both fleets, 11 human ships destroyed, but over 100 mechanical vessels reduced to floating scrap metal. Zephin, the alien liaison, stared at the tactical display with shaking hands. His species measured military success by how many of their own forces survived. The idea of deliberately sacrificing ships for strategic advantage was completely foreign to him. "Casualty report?" he asked, his voice trembling with shock and horror. Foster, standing calmly on her damaged bridge while emergency lights flickered around her, consulted her datapad with the same casual attitude she might use to check the weather. 11 ships lost, 3,000 personnel killed in action, enemy fleet completely eliminated, estimated 115 vessels destroyed. She looked up from her report with satisfaction. "I'd call that a very good exchange rate. Command will be pleased." Zephin stared at her in disbelief. "Speak of your dead as if they were just numbers on a page. 3,000 beings died today, and you act like it means nothing." Foster's expression grew serious for the first time since the battle began. Those 3,000 people died doing exactly what they trained to do, protecting the galaxy from an enemy that would have killed billions. Every single one of them knew the odds when we engaged. They chose to fight anyway because that's what humans do. Meanwhile, scattered throughout the debris field, human survivors were already adapting to their situation with the same casual attitude toward mortal danger that defined their species. Lieutenant Colonel Ryan Mitchell floated in the wreckage of his marine transport, his environmental suit keeping him alive in the vacuum of space. He activated his emergency beacon with one hand while using the other to collect useful salvage. From the floating debris, "Command, this is Mitchell. A ship's been turned into modern art, but most of my Marines are still breathing vacuum just fine. Send pickup when it's convenient. We'll just be out here enjoying the view and maybe collecting some enemy tech for the engineers to study." His transmission was calm, almost cheerful, as if floating helplessly in the deadly vacuum of space was just another minor inconvenience rather than a life-threatening emergency. Deep within the mechanical swarm's central processing cores, artificial intelligences were experiencing something they had never encountered before: complete system failure. These computers had been designed by their creators to predict and counter the behavior of rational beings who valued their own survival above all else. But humans weren't rational by galactic standards. They came from a world that had spent millions of years trying to kill them. They had responded by becoming the kind of species that treated personal extinction as just another workplace hazard. The swarm's predictive models, built on the assumption that all intelligent life would prioritize self-preservation, began collapsing entirely when faced with beings who genuinely didn't care if they died as long as they completed their mission. 4. The first time since their creation, the mechanical swarms began to understand something that would fundamentally change their approach to warfare. They weren't fighting a civilized species. They were fighting something far more dangerous, a species that had weaponized their own survival instincts. The war was over, but victory had come at a price that left the entire galaxy stunned into silence. Admiral Jake Morrison walked through what remained of the mechanical swarm's central command hub, his boots crunching on twisted metal and crystalline fragments that had once controlled millions of killer machines across dozens of star systems. His environmental suit's radiation detector clicked steadily, measuring levels that would kill most galactic species within minutes. Morrison barely noticed the sound after growing up on Terra. Background radiation was just another fact of life, like gravity or oxygen. Around him, the command nexus lay in complete ruins, its walls melted by nuclear fire, its floors cracked by explosive decompression. Ambassador Veltar materialized as a hologram beside him, too frightened to visit the contaminated site in person. The alien diplomat's image flickered slightly in the radioactive environment, and his voice carried a hollow, defeated tone that hadn't been there before the war began. "Admiral Morrison," Veltar said quietly, "the Galactic Council requires a final casualty report. We need to know. We need to understand the cost of our survival." Morrison stopped walking and pulled out a datapad that somehow still functioned, despite being exposed to enough radiation to fry most electronic equipment. He scrolled through the numbers with the same casual attitude he might use to check a shopping list. 60% casualties across the entire fleet, he reported matter-of-factly. That's about 40,000 personnel killed in action. 43. Ships completely destroyed, 17 more damaged beyond repair. Oh, and 17 inhabited worlds are now uninhabitable due to our tactical decisions. He paused to pull out what looked like a small white cylinder and lit one end with a small flame. Veltar watched in confusion as Morrison put the other end in his mouth and inhaled, producing a small cloud of smoke. The alien assumed this was some sort of ceremonial ritual to honor the dead. "Could have been worse," Morrison added, exhaling smoke into his helmet's air recycler. "We were expecting 70% casualties when we started this operation." The holographic projection of Veltar flickered more violently, though Morrison couldn't tell if that was due to the radiation or the ambassador's emotional state. "Admiral, you speak of 40,000 deaths and 17 destroyed worlds as if they were ... minor inconveniences?" "They're not minor," Morrison replied, his voice growing serious for the first time in the conversation. "Every person who died in this war died protecting billions of lives across the galaxy. They knew the risks. They understood the mission, and they chose to fight anyway. That's what makes them heroes, not numbers on a report. He took another drag from his cigarette and looked around the ruined command center. But you want to know the truth? This wasn't even our worst Tuesday back home. Terra throws worse disasters at us every few months, and we just call it weather. 2 hours later, the emergency session of the Galactic Council convened in the Great Chamber that had witnessed 1,000 years of diplomatic negotiations. Representatives from hundreds of species gathered to hear the final report on humanity's intervention in the mechanical crisis. General Patricia Hayes stood before the assembled delegates, power armor still bearing scorch marks from the final assault on the swarm's home base. Her helmet was tucked under one arm, revealing a face that looked like it had been carved from stone by someone who understood that life was a contact sport. "The immediate threat has been eliminated," she announced, her voice carrying clearly. "Through the vast chamber, our forces will be departing for Earth within the next 48 hours to begin rebuilding operations." Council Leader Thren raised a tentacle nervously. "General Hayes, your reports indicate massive losses to your fleet and personnel. Surely it will take decades to recover from such devastation." Hayes laughed, and the sound made several dozen. Species representatives instinctively reached for their personal defense devices. "Decades. Counselor, you clearly don't understand how humans operate. We'll have full fleet replacement within 6 months, maybe 8 if we decide to upgrade the weapons systems while we're at it." Ambassador Veltar, still appearing as a hologram. Due to his fear of the radiation exposure Hayes had accumulated during the campaign, spoke up in disbelief. "General, you cannot simply replace such massive losses. The industrial capacity alone would require." Ambassador Hayes interrupted, her smile revealing teeth that had evolved for tearing meat. "Let me explain something about Earth. We're a planet where the weather tries to kill us. The animals hunt us for sport, the plants are poisonous, the ground shakes without warning, and the sky occasionally drops rocks on us from space." She gestured toward the tactical displays still showing the devastation of the recent campaign. "What you call a catastrophic military disaster, we call a learning experience. What you call impossible odds, we call Tuesday morning. What you call extinctional level threats, we call target practice." Several council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Representative Korvash from the Merchant Federation spoke up. "Surely you cannot sustain such losses indefinitely. No species can continue to sacrifice so much without eventual collapse." Expression grew genuinely amused. "Representative, we've been practicing extinction scenarios since we first crawled out of the ocean. Ice ages, asteroid impacts, supervolcano eruptions, plague outbreaks, and wars that lasted centuries. Each time, we came back stronger than before, because that's what Terra taught us to do." She paused, letting her words sink into the minds of beings who had never faced such existential challenges. This mechanical swarm crisis. This was just our final exam. We passed. The Great Chamber fell silent as the implications became clear. The galaxy now faced a choice that would define the next era of galactic civilization. They could embrace these dangerous saviors who had proven they could defeat any threat. Or they could maintain their comfortable isolation and hope that nothing, like the mechanical swarms, ever appeared again. The vote to establish the human military exchange program was called immediately. When the final tally was announced, it had passed by exactly 1 vote, changing the course of galactic history forever. Some representatives celebrated. Others wondered what they had just unleashed upon the universe.